And welcome back. With summer break officially over for most people and Congress back in session, both parties are confronting serious issues heading into the fall. For Republicans, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who just initiated an impeachment inquiry of President Biden, has until the end of this month to rally his caucus to a spending agreement and avoid a government shutdown, all while navigating threats from that caucus to oust him from the speakership. Democrats, meanwhile, must contend with continued polling that show the president tied with former President Trump and most other GOP candidates, while also facing a growing number of setbacks and distractions in Washington. And joining me now is the panel. On set, Heidi Heitkamp, former Democratic senator from North Dakota and a CNBC contributor. Sarah Chamberlain, president and CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. And Tia Mitchell, Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Thank you all for joining me at the Press Now. And Tia, I want to start with you. We're still a long way out from the 2024 election. Was it like 416 days?
Down to the day. You're better than me.
Yeah, you wouldn't know it from some of the discussion we're already having. But the polls that we're hearing about, the new polls regarding President Biden, does this square with what you've been hearing? And is this where President Biden expected to be at this point against former President Trump?
I think President Biden would like to have higher approval numbers, higher polling numbers, but I think his campaign would say there's a lot of time. Right now, Trump and the other Republicans are fighting for that nomination. It's not even general election season yet. I think Biden's campaign would also say national polls are not what is the true barometer of how to win a presidential election. But it is troubling. The White House, the Biden campaign has tried a lot of things to tout his agenda, tout what he's accomplished in his first 2 years of office, and it's not resonating to the point that it's turning things around. And
Sarah, I wanted to turn to you. A lot of Republicans have been making the electability argument against Trump. There's been a lot of talk that, another Republican would be better suited to take on President Biden. But looking at that poll, does this poll take the wind out of that argument? I know it's within the margin of error, but 48-46, it looks, according to this poll, that former President Trump is in decent shape, very good shape against Biden.
He certainly is in decent shape, and the Republican Main Street Partnership did a poll that matches this poll, so he is certainly right there. People like President Trump. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that. I know Governor Sununu has been very public about wishing that maybe Trump would not be the nominee, but at this point, it looks like he will be. So, it doesn't even matter what is going on with the law, the indictments.
I want to turn to Heidi now. To win a campaign, you need to motivate voters, as you know.
That's right.
Now, the poll also shows that 50% of all voters are dreading a Trump-Biden rematch, including 60% of Democrats and independents. So the voters say they don't want a rematch. But it looks like they're going to get it, right?
Well, who knows what's going to happen between now and Election Day. But, one of the things that the Republicans need to be very concerned about is that once the choice is just between Biden and Trump, that there will be people who will, not necessarily favorable to the president, but who do not want Trump to be president again. And so I think that the best bet that you have right now is that Trump being the opponent for Biden gives Biden a headwind, or it gives Trump a headwind that Biden doesn't have. But, the one thing that I will say, and I think the administration has a little bit of an ostrich symptom here. Head in the sand, pay no attention. We've got a great story to tell. Well, you got to start telling the story, because first impressions in politics matter.
You mentioned you got to start telling the story. At what point do Democrats start panicking about 2024?
I don't know that anyone's panicked, but people want to see a campaign.
Right. Well, that's what I'm asking. At what point? If it continues along this route, and panicking may be a strong word, but at what point do Democrats really get concerned about this?
I saw Debbie Dingell tell you that it's all good and don't trust polls, but politicians trust polls. Politicians read polls.
Right.
And the bottom line is you've got to respond. And if you let that narrative continue, too old, not up to the job, not mentally able, that will embed itself and be so much harder to move than it is right now. And so, my advice would be get out there, prove your point, run a campaign, and do not play, the Rose Garden strategy.
Right. Now, Tia, I want to turn to something that has been coming up a lot in the campaign that the Biden administration and the White House really does not want to touch, but it has been coming up, the issue of age. What do you think what role do you think that issue is going to play in the months to come?
Well, that's a big reason why Biden is lagging in the polls. And I think the White House would say they do talk about it. He makes self-deprecating jokes. He acknowledges his age. But it's an issue. I think that Trump being not that much younger inoculates it a little bit. But the fact that President Biden, it's not just age. It's the fact that he visibly moves more slower. He talks and sometimes loses his train of thought more in ways that are public because he's the president and he's on the public stage. So it's something that they know they have to deal with. It's who he is. It's what Democrats have right now.
And to that point, I was at Hampton University yesterday at a very energetic event with the vice president, but she didn't really mention President Biden directly by name. This was meant to, energize young voters. But I spoke with several of the students there. Let's take a listen to what some of they told me, and we can talk about it on the other side. Do you think that President Biden, do you think his age is a concern?
I think it is a concern because, we don't want to be voting for him and then he may not actually be able to serve the full term.
Do you think that President Biden's age is a concern?
I would say yes.
Biden or Trump?
Biden.
Do you think President Biden is too old to run for re-election?
Yes, I do.
Really?
I do. I think it's good that he has Kamala Harris because she's young and she fits in a lot of demographics, so she might be able to provide a fresh mind on a lot of topics. But President Biden himself, I feel like this should be his last year in office.
So, look, they were blunter than I anticipated. Some of them saying, "Oh, he might not be able to make it to the end of his term." However, at the same time, when I asked them Biden versus Trump, they obviously, they obviously said Biden, and that squares with a recent NBC News poll that we had. That despite concerns about age, young voters ages 18 to 34, they will go for President Biden by a wide margin, 60 to 35, I believe it is. The question is, can those voters actually turn out? Are those voters, even though they support President Biden and Vice President Harris, are they going to get out to the polls?
One thing I would tell you, and it should not be underestimated, and that is choice. Women's reproductive rights, once again, will be on this ballot. If there is a clear differential between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, we're going to see young people voting issues like climate, voting issues like choice. And so, let's not put too fine of a point on it because this is a race between two individuals. But the issues for young people are on the Democratic side.
And absolutely, that is something that Vice President Harris really stressed in her remarks yesterday. Also today, she was in North Carolina talking about climate change, gun safety, reproductive rights. That's a theme she's hitting over and over again. But, Sarah, I want to get your take on this. What you just heard, from those young voters, what do you make of that? And can Republicans also turn out their young voters as well?
Well, we don't have as many young voters.
That's true.
Let's just be honest.
That's right.
But I'm not sure those voters are going to turn out. I have a daughter that's about that age. She's 17 now, and she thinks Biden is too old. He is older than her grandfather on both sides. So that's a little scary. I'm not sure these kids are going to turn out. They're going to talk about it, but will they really go and vote? The Democrats need them to vote, though.
Absolutely. It was very interesting. Another group that I also talked to, they said that they grew up on the Obamas, and they viewed, former President Obama as their dad. He had young children in the White House, but they look at President Biden as their grandfather.
Right. And as Sarah said, he's older than a lot of the young people's grandfather. He has grandchildren that are older than those college students you spoke to.
Right. Well, thank you, Tia, so much. Heidi and Sarah, thank you so much for joining us here on Meet the Press Now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.